Hey everyone, Christina Simmons from Say Yes to Holiness. A little bit different today because I wanted to focus upon transforming ways to transform your pain and suffering so it has purpose and meaning according to the Mandalorian and Jesus. So you might notice I'm wearing a shirt. This is the way. And a shout out to the guys at Voyage Comics, Philip Kozlowski and those guys. They're doing some great graphic novel work on beautiful Catholic themes, Finney and the Seven Mountains, and Joan of Arc, a lot of different things. So go and check them out. But this is the way. I'm a bit of a Star Wars geek. Despite kind of the missteps that were had with the latest trilogy, but they're still good there. And but the true essence of Star Wars is found again in the Mandalorian. And for those of you who might not be familiar, the Mandalorian is a bounty hunter. Season 1 was last fall. Season 2 trailer just dropped, so I'm just kind of geeking out a little bit. But what it did is it caused me to reflect on how it is that especially the Mandalorian really takes the series itself is very gritty, gives you a very visceral sense of the challenges of daily life, and particularly for the Mandalorian people, because they no longer have a home planet, and so they have to go and be bounty hunters, and they have a very small, tight-knit community. But a part of it is because of so many things that have happened to them. But neither here nor there, they learn to deal with those 5 different types of pain and suffering that we run into in our life. And that first one is literally mental and emotional suffering. And one of the reasons why the Mandalorian is such a sympathetic character is because his entire people, they no longer have a home planet. We later find out that the Mandalorian himself, spoiler alert a little bit, is that he was adopted, and he has been raised within the Mandalorian community. And the response, whenever there is something difficult to do, is "this is the way." And the response is, "this is the way." And that's what the culture is that to be able to deal with so much mental, and emotional suffering, they have put together a code of "this is the way." And Jesus has done the same for us. Jesus has tasted our sorrow. He understands. And, your suffering is not in vain. That's the whole point, is that our suffering isn't in vain. God allows it to bring about an even greater good, even if we can't see it. And the Mandalorian does this as well, of where he goes on what's supposed to be a bounty, and he brings that bounty back. And in the end, what happens is that he begins to be transformed because he becomes attached, sympathetic to the plight of another creature who has been abandoned, has no home, has no family, so in that way, he becomes a part of giving his own mental and emotional suffering. He's able to find purpose and meaning because he's able to start to bring about greater good, and that's just one. I mean, the second type of pain that we tend to deal with is bodily suffering. In all of the adventures of the Mandalorian in now protecting the charge that he originally was sent to capture and to bring back, and then come to find out that bounty was to be killed, and it's a child. And so what happens is that the bodily suffering that he went through in order to bring the bounty back to where he was supposed to bring the child, and then subsequently in following missions in protecting the child from those who originally had hired the Mandalorian. But the fact is that this is the way is the mantra because it's this is how suffering and betterment for the Mandalore people, the Mandalore community, can be brought about, is through persevering through bodily suffering. And Jesus invites us to unite our suffering to Him, to be able to give our suffering meaning and purpose. Just like our mental and emotional suffering, our bodily suffering can do the same. And when we unite our suffering to Jesus's, then we console His heart. And this also gives us life and strength. In the same way that the Mandalorian, by this is the way, is given life and strength by uniting what it is that he has to do with his people. A third type of pain that we all suffer are humiliations. And for those of us who struggle with pride, that would be me, humiliations are the gateway to us being able to grow in humility, but they don't make it any easier. Those defeats, those ridicule, those attacks on our reputation, deserved or undeserved, most often undeserved, slander, gossip, false judgment, all of these things humiliate us, and many times we'll respond with anger, with vengeance. And the Mandalorian suffered humiliations as well. He was defeated, he was captured, he was betrayed, but yet he endured. And in the midst of those humiliations, he was able to find purpose and meaning because he knew that what he was doing was good. So this is what Jesus asks us to do. He says, unite your humiliations with me, console my sacred heart, and together we save souls. Another type of suffering that we endure is bodily exhaustion. And this is something that there's no doubt Jesus knew what it meant to be exhausted. And the question is, what do we do when we are facing exhaustion? The Mandalorian, when he would face exhaustion, he would push through. He would bind up his wounds. He would cauterize, a wound, and then he'd go on in order to protect the child, or to take the child to where it needed to go, or So there's all of these different ways that through bodily exhaustion we persevere, we continue, and we always have the temptation in bodily exhaustion in particular. We have the temptation to let our guard down, to just kind of say, I'll just veg out for a while. I do this. I get tired, and instead of doing things like, going to sleep to get rest, or going to exercise in order to boost my energy, or spending time in prayer in order to find that center, that purpose, that peace, I veg out in front of the TV. And so all of us face that temptation when we're confronted with bodily exhaustion. And what we need to do is to remember, just like the Mandalorian, this is the way to persevere through, or to remember Jesus as he carried our cross. It was his cross, but it was on our behalf. So to persevere and be able to unite it to his will. And the fifth type, of course, of suffering that all of us will eventually confront is death. And there's this one scene in the first season of The Mandalorian, and it's a very critical one, of where this is where the relationship, especially between the Mandalorian and his charge, the child, becomes very, kind of closer. The Mandalorian is fighting a great beast, and he's getting his bum kicked. I mean, it looks like he's dead. And he realizes this, but yet he picks himself out of the mud, and he's turning in order to battle again. He barely can hold, his weapon, and he buckles down. And I know that he's mentally going, this is the way. There's no more greater glory than for me to do this. And in that moment, I'm not going to spoil it, but in that moment, there is where the child does something that totally transforms that instance, and the creature is defeated, and it just totally changes everything. And Jesus does the same thing with death. Instead of death having, instead of death being a curse, it becomes a blessing. Because Jesus has given death purpose and meaning. St. Teresa of Avila, once said, "I want to see God, but in order to see him, I have to die." And Jesus tells us this. We have to die to ourselves in order to have eternal life. So in the same way that the Mandalorian was willing to sacrifice in order to save the child, we too have to be willing to sacrifice our lives in order to have that eternal life. So a little different. And so I wanted to kind of share that, just a few musings. I hope you've enjoyed it. This little bit of popular culture, but that's where we have the opportunity to truly connect our faith and our life, and to find that inspiration, that encouragement to help us persevere on the journey, to be able to recognize that there's goodness and truth and beauty here around me, and to go and to grab it and to focus upon those messages and to share them with others like I'm doing here today. So I hope that you've enjoyed this. If you're enjoying this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's a whole bunch of other connections between faith and life in this series. And then also, if you want to get notified of upcoming events, but also be able to be part of my email list, you can simply text "Say Yes to Holiness," all one word, "Say Yes to Holiness," to 66866, and you'll get prompted. Just put your email in, and it's as simple as that. So text "Say Yes to Holiness" to 66866. And you can find out more about what I do at sayyestoholiness.com, and check out the Say Yes to Holiness podcast. Thanks for your time today. I hope that you've enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed bringing The Mandalorian to you. The second season, for those of you who might not be aware, is starting out at the end of October 30th. So you got time to catch up on the first season. If you aren't a fan yet, I know that if you watch it, you will be. So thanks again. Shout out to Philip Kozlowski and the guys at Voyage Comics for this great t-shirt. This is the way. And I hope that you know that I will continue to pray for you each and every day, that you have the ability and the courage to be able to do whatever it takes to tell the master of death, "Not today." This is the way. God bless.